Well, hello, everybody. My name is Matt Stranek, and this is our latest in the new Writers on Writing conversation series that is based with my role as an instructor of English at Keanu College in North Alberta, in lovely Canada here, near the energy sector, the gateway to the north, as it were, as far as it goes in these regions. And this is sort of a cross-country, cross national endeavor in explorations, creativity writ large through writing significantly, but also including other areas and formats. And so, really grateful to have you with us for this conversation with, I guess, a very, I think, prolific and esteemed author in various formats, gotta say, notably the suspense, but not exclusively, and really just a creative endeavor that has spanned decades at this point, as far as the writing goes. And he is also somewhat of a musician and somewhat of a patriarch as well, with kids and grandkids out in the community of Fredericton, New Brunswick, and surrounding environs, all kind of engaged in other creative lives of their own. So, again, we're here to talk about the writing, but we're definitely here for the other things as well. Chuck, thanks a lot for being here. Appreciate it a lot.
It's a real pleasure for me, and a bit of a privilege too. I love the notion that that Alberta and New Brunswick can have a chat every now and again, and also since you and I have known each other for quite some time and have a bit of a respect for one another, that we can make that manifest through a great conversation about writing, my passion.
Very much so. And again, speaking across a pretty wide range of audiences here, because that is the endeavor, right? We're going with a sort of scholarly approach. We are sort of shaking the pop culture kind of tree a bit in terms of the presentation in the spirit of a true independent media endeavor. And I would say to anybody who's watching this, just to point to the fact that the Maritimes generally, Atlantic Canada, that is, has been home to a lot of really highly awesome independent culture across numerous scenes and across numerous art forms, right? Visual arts, film, music, and literature all have a special esteem in the East Coast that I personally, having lived elsewhere, really, once I've sort of traveled hither and yon, you realize that's one of the aspects that makes Atlantic Canada so special. And again, you have to live here to get it. Well, it is kind of not just a beer slogan for Alpine brewers, but there is something of the independent ethos which permeates the art scene, and we're just going to do it no matter what. And it's usually rad. So Chuck identifies as a writer significantly, and we're here to talk about that. Musician, right? Patriarch of sorts. What else am I missing here from the description, Chuck?
Well, I make the best cheesecake I've ever tasted, and I'm in addition to being a writer, I'm also a fan of writers, and so I think of them as distinct passions that meld to make me a better version of myself. So tip of the hat to all the writers out there. Fred Stenson in Alberta as an example, so there's that.
Awesome. And again, I have some somewhat scripted-ish questions, which are definitely including anybody you care to shout out and bring up here. So again,
bring them on.
Fred, here we are, right? I'm sure there will be more in the course of the next 30 or 40 minutes. So if I may, Chuck, again, kind of in terms of how I speak to these endeavors across various folks with the series, I often find myself just kind of at the beginning going back to, because, I basically have known you and your kids since I was a small child. Sometimes I sort of think of my history with Chuck begins there. And it's true, it does. But Chuck was well into his adult years and with Lois significantly, well prior to all that. So if we could just go into the Wayback Machine, sir, as a kid, growing up in Miramichi, New Brunswick, northern New Brunswick, beautiful, beautiful place in the world, world renowned, as a matter of fact, for fishing and other aquatic pursuits. This right here is Google's representation of the Miramichi River.
It looks like the upper Miramichi right there.
As far as it goes, I was born in Miramichi City, Chatham, back in the day. So again, right? Yeah, yeah. And so again, I guess speaking to Chuck as a young Chuck back in the 60s and mainly the 70s, I guess, when you're coming into your, I guess, awareness of music and literature and other art forms. I mean, again, what was it like around your home? As you know, like were your parents big on music, family members, and books? I mean, what was the sort of mix there as you were growing up and coming into your own as a young person in the world?
Well, it honest to God, it did not occur to me until this very second, and this is because of the context of the way you framed the question.
Okay.
My father read Dusters, Westerns, and he read the detective noir novels. So John D. MacDonald, for instance, he introduced me to John D. MacDonald as a 12-year-old, and
awesome.
It was, and I'm just tipping my hat to him for that. It just never occurred to me until a moment ago that's whenever I think of my father, I think of the musical influence, because we would have house parties. Oh, I remember being 3 years old and my father entertaining a half dozen naval officers from Germany, none of whom spoke English, but they did like beer. So, that would be a Wednesday evening in the house that I grew up. So the musical influence was fantastic. I am a very average musician who works hard at it, but my father was a gifted musician and my sons are gifted musicians. And it skipped a generation. I'm sorry, but the appreciation for it is there. My first writing victory was grade 8. I got a B on an English essay, and the essay was so well written. I looked at it afterward and said, who the hell wrote this? I don't even recognize how well this is written. It was hilarious and insightful, had research to it. It was the cat's meow. I got a B. And I the first time I ever looked at anyone other than looking at their feet, I was paralyzed with shyness as a young person. But anyway, I went to her and I said, why did I get a B? And she said, because I don't give A's. And that moment I said, I will be striving to get A's from here on in.
That anecdote lands for me in a number of ways. As somebody who's kind of had an interest in writing myself over the years and has somehow kind of had a career now as an educator, what you just described really kind of lands from an educator standpoint. And I always appreciate just having, how people sort of come into an awareness, through school opportunities, often just in terms of like, okay, this is something that may actually be sanctioned somehow, that may have, somebody besides me at the other end of it that might potentially be interested. And as
but the other end of the book, the other bookend to this story would be grade 10, when my English teacher said to me, why do you think that writers cannot be successful if they come from a small town like Newcastle, New Brunswick, or Miramichi, New Brunswick? And you should disabuse yourself of that. There's a young man. He's only a year or two older than you. His name is David Adams Richards. And where do you think he came from? So that meant a lot to me.
Well, and I appreciate, just as you were sort of turning that into the conversation, I'm like, I wonder if the esteemed Senator David Adams Richard, as well as cultural, contributor across a whole range of areas, Probably one of the best novelists of, certainly Atlantic Canada the last 50 years,
I'd say
easily.
Canada.
Across Canada, right? He holds his own nationally,
Yeah.
and internationally too, as far as
Yes.
it goes. If you want to look at really richly drawn lives of people of a certain region, I mean, whatever you can say about his sort of penchant for people who are hard living in his novels, you can never say that it's less than truthful with his novels, in my
That's
opinion,
right.
with his prose. And that's really
Yeah.
high praise for a literary novelist.
Yep.
And so again, right, everybody kind of hashes out sort of different areas within their career and within their sort of creative endeavors. I wonder then, you kind of mentioned, the role that creativity kind of had going into, just kind of being what you call sort of a mediocre musician, being a writer who was interested in it and wanted to move it forward. Let's flash forward to when you're in your university and college years. That was the first time you'd lived away from Miramichi, right? Being in Fredericton to go to UNB.
Yes and no.
Okay.
That was the first time I've lived alone.
Okay.
But I'm an Air Force brat, so I moved 19 times by the time I was 21.
What?
Yeah. So
What?
yeah.
Okay.
Germany, Alberta, Ontario, good
Nine.
long stint in Quebec, back to Chatham, away from Chatham, back to Chatham, that sort of thing. Oh yeah.
Okay. Well, I'm starting to sort of see aspects of the history of Chuck that again, somebody who has known him, 42 plus years of my 47 here,
Yeah.
new opportunities to learn about each other through conversations about the arts
and the role of the on-base library cannot be overstated. It's just
well, please delineate that
transformed me.
if you want to maybe then go into that a bit further, because one thing I have to say, Chuck, and this actually does speak to a scripted question I have, so it's not totally ad hoc. But one thing I have to say, Chuck, that I've admired about the way you carried yourself with this literary enterprise that I've seen unfolding really over the past 10 or 15 years at this point, at least from the public standpoint, my adult awareness of what you were up to, I suppose. What I would, say is that it's so impressive how much you're engaged with the mentorship piece of other writers within your community and within your region. You're active with the Writers Federation of New Brunswick. You're involved in other literary groups. Probably, I'm assuming you're involved at the national level to some extent.
The Writers Union of Canada. Yeah, I was on the boards. I was on the boards of both of those organizations.
Yeah, so I mean, this is where I see, the fact that you moved so much as a military brat, where you found sort of a real place on those bases for the library to sort of sustain you throughout those transitions, right? And then with music, sort of all the way through, kind of as a binding all the way through.
Very much so.
And so now,
yes.
You have a significant career in the public service, the Canadian federal government, involving travel into Europe and other destinations, which we talked about in our previous conversation, because there was a previous conversation speaking a bit more to the literature as such. But again, right, I see with you, just somebody who sort of takes the public engagement, the helping bring people up. I mean, it just seems like a natural part of who you are through your career, through your other kind of community activities. And now I just see that as a really significant part of what you seem to be doing through Writers Federation, through the Writers Union, and through other means. I wonder if you could perhaps speak to that more a bit than you already have.
Well, and this might come in handy as an informed comment that you might share with a student of yours who has a product partly or completely finished and needs to find what the next step might be. What what I've experienced is in my travels and accomplishments through the Writers Union of Canada, the Writers Federation of New Brunswick, a becoming a fellow at a writer in residence establishment, the Kingsbray International Residency for the Arts, the literary trail in Miramichi, the Miramichi Literary Trail. These experiences have, together with my sales and reviews, have caused me to become a bit better known to the public, and as such, I have people who want to move to the next phase of writing, whatever their phase was before, and so I get approached on a regular basis to help them to move to the next step. It's very challenging when you feel that your days are full before somebody approaches you, but at the same time, you know how you felt when you were at that stage, and so from time to time, you're able to spare a couple of hours here and there to nudge somebody along, and I know it's always appreciated.
Well, and thank you for that. I would say that something actually that you mentioned in our previous conversation that actually comes up in my mind. I've mentioned it in classes that I've taught because I thought it was a good insight. Is you've distinguished before between writing and writage.
Yes.
And then like the writing is where the joy is. The writing is like, this is the part of it that adds to me as a person and, adds to my spiritual and emotional connection to the world, right?
Yes.
That you can just, when you have your 10,000 hours, folks, again, Chuck and I both have our 10,000 hours. I know that's kind of facetious, but what I've really ended up telling my students is there's no substitute for time in the chair. You put yourself there, and then eventually it stops feeling like an effort. Eventually, it's like I know exactly what to say, and it's not even a conscious thing anymore. It just becomes almost a form of muscle memory. Again, not to sort of speak too much to my friggin' thing on it, but again, right, your delineation there between like the act of writing and then everything that sort of is around it and supplements it. What aspects of that? We sort of spoken to mentorship and engagement. What other pieces of that puzzle are there? And I guess what I'm really wondering is, because again, to speak more to, I guess, a scripted question here, how do you keep that reservoir full? How do you keep that creativity where it needs to be and still acquit yourself of the writage without having it sort of compromise the actual source of your creativity?
I think you just opened up that warehouse door that Indiana Jones's Ark of the Covenant is deposited, and that is a mighty big warehouse that you just opened. So I can't possibly address all of it right now, but I will tell you that when Stephen King was writing at the beginning, he was scrambling to get stories, and he was an intuitive writer. So like me, in that small way, ideas would just descend into your head, and then you transpose them on through a keyboard into real life, and you almost aren't responsible for the stories because they're just transmitted to you. Well, you can't get there until you get your arse in the chair, and that's the first absolute rule that I have, is apply the seat of the bum to the seat of the chair. The other thing that I'll say, and I'm jumping ahead to the end of this discussion, this part of the discussion, is a great Dorothy Parker quote. And she said, "I hate writing. I love having written." And I don't agree with that. And I don't think she did either. But what I'll say is, I hate editing. and I love having edited. But I mean, I do the first edits, and then my editor does the hard work, the grunt work, and my work is shite until my editor gets at it. So it's a big deal when you're starting out to understand that not everybody's eye, but the eye of somebody who actually knows what they're talking about can be so beneficial to you as a writer.
Any exposure that you can get to any reader is going to benefit, even if it's a matter of just, wow, that did not land for me, but I'm glad that I learned that it didn't land, right?
Yep.
You have to learn about your own work because it goes from sort of just being a sort of esoteric, very personal process to being a public good. And the only way to do that is sort of by putting it into your beta readers, your sympathetic friends, your people who are, cheering for you and interested. And anybody can offer insight, I think. And that's, again, that's the educator in me kind of speaking up now, is in like.
Well, at a certain point, I started to funnel down the input from everybody because I wanted to please everybody. That's in my nature, to be a pleaser. And that's not helpful because then you don't have the filter that allows you to practice perfectly, as they say. Like, practice doesn't make perfect. Perfect practice makes perfect. And so you can get there only after filtering out the, I love your book, you should be published, to, you know what, on page 5, I stopped being inside the character and the scene, and I said, what happened here? It doesn't matter what happened. The writer has to fix it because the suspension of disbelief gets broken. And so, those kinds of guidances, they're not specific, but they sure did tell you that there's a red flag going up in that passage.
I really appreciate how you just sort of framed that whole really significant collaboration between yourself and your editor, or an editor, right?
It was transformative. Getting a good editor was transformative.
Yeah, right. When you finally have that sort of dialogue with somebody who really gets it, and you're both on the same page, so to speak, to turn it, the aspiration into something that crosses the line into being a legit cultural good, right?
Yeah.
I don't want to put my sort of academic sort of, let's talk about this as a phenomenon kind of thing, because quite frankly, you can spoil a lot of fun that way. But I just have to ask, Chuck, I mean, again, so many different approaches to writing, so many different formats. I know you've tried a lot of things besides the novel. What is it about the novel? When did you realize that the novel was really going to be your way forward, as opposed to the short story, as opposed to, I know poetry really isn't for everybody, but it just in sort of other literary modes. Because one thing about the novel is that it tends to take a doggone long time. It tends to be a very solitary, lengthy work effort. For me, lately, my thing is kind of these personal essays and the like that kind of go up with these, podcasts and whatever. It's a very short production cycle from conception to execution. Whereas with a novel, I mean, you're living with it for a real long time. You're not necessarily. There we go. The novel in question. So, Chuck, what is it about novels for those of us who are not novelists? Why do you enjoy writing in that format?
Super fast. I had to learn how to write a novel after learning how to write things. And so in my 30s and 40s, I would even sell tourism articles and essays, sold a few to the Globe and Mail. You get initial small victories. But for me, I always wanted to write the longer piece and didn't have the experiential wherewithal. I wasn't seasoned enough to be able to write a novel until my late 40s. And then I was writing poor novels, and then I was writing better novels, and these all went into the drawer. never to be seen again, but I did learn from them. And then I found an editor slash agent who helped me with my first novel. Now, back to the epiphany was I was in Bucharest in Romania on business, all alone in the country. So when I wasn't working, the few hours that I wasn't working, I was alone. And I was in the lap of luxury for most of those days. I had a couple of bad adventures for 2 days out of, let's say, 35 or something. But effectively, I was alone. And I woke up one morning and I had the beginning of the novel handed to me on a silver platter by my brain, together with a fully formed protagonist, a thief for hire with no conscience, or we think he has no conscience at that point. And so overnight, it was handed to me. And then when I started writing, I went through it. I was in my 50s at that point. I went through the novel. It was fantastic until I got a hold of an editor, and the editor says, "Well, it's shit, and you have to do these 30 things." He didn't say shit. It was the next editor that I got said that. The first editor said, "Can I have 30 pages and I'll just play with them?" He gave them back to me, and there was more read on the page than there was typing. And I said, he says, "Well, how do you feel about this discussion?" And I said, "Well, I'm feeling pretty beat up. Look at all the mistakes I made." He said, "You only made 6 mistakes, but you made them over and over again. How easy is it to fix 6 mistakes?" So then I had it, and I said, "Okay, now I've got a book." Gave it to an editor who was looking for to represent authors. So he got at it, and then he beat me up 5 pages at a time. And at the end of it, I said, "Okay, now it's a good book." And I immediately got a publishing contract, and they gave me an editor, and the editor said, "Okay, it's time to fix it." So that's 3 experienced editors all making it better and better and better. So I learned how to love editing through kind, not always gentle editors who knew what they were doing. And the reward is, at the end of it, you look at your book and you say, "This looks more like a book than it did 3 months ago." So that's how Chuck gets to win.
Well, and again, I appreciate sort of drawing back the curtain a bit on that, because, again, for people who are perhaps sort of earlier on the stage of the journey, things like discussions about editors or representation or publishing, sometimes that almost is maybe a bit in the front of people's minds, maybe more than just sort of telling the best story that they're capable of, and really just committing themselves to saying, as Chuck did, you're going to have to feed your drawer with some bad writing before you kind of get something that's ready to have a life, in a public setting outside of you, vetted through a, let's face it, commercial quality assurance process of sorts. It's still a valid artistic conceit to carry it around. It's still a valid artistic conceit to try and write the next Finnegan's Wake.
Yes.
Unpublishable though it may be, because not everything has to have.
Yeah, we're not all Mr. Joyce. No.
Right. I mean, again, there are lots of legitimate ways of participating in the writing endeavor and the creative endeavor. And again, as a teacher and as somebody who kind of practices with this stuff a bit myself, I mean, I just see it as a spectrum of things, right? As opposed to just, Stephen King, then people who are less successful, and then people who just don't get published. I mean, it's just, So in terms of what makes Atlantic Canada such a great spot, I mean, I know you're committed to living there because you have always been there, Chuck. your family is there, you got significant connections. Even if one were to separate, just hypothetically, in a thought experiment, those sort of family and sort of career connections to a place which keep you there, is there anything about the Maritimes in particular which may be conducive to literary creativity?
Well, there is. I'd like to just illustrate it with a couple of my novels.
Please do.
This one here, The Body on the Underwater Road, is a suspense thriller about that aforesaid contract thief, Donovan. And this one is set in St. Andrews, New Brunswick.
Beauty.
So when I am writing the scenes, I'm there. I know how many steps the pub is from the end of the wharf. I know what an empty wharf at 1 a.m. when the pub closes. I know where the person who's waiting for somebody to come out of that pub would be standing if they didn't want to be seen. So to have setting after setting after setting in the Maritimes that you can know with the back of it, like the back of your hand, that confers confidence in writing, because write what you know. Well, there's a little bit of truth to that. And so when I started, maybe this one will look more visually for the viewer. But when I started writing a cozy mystery series, completely different style of mystery, what I chose was a small town in the Maritimes, because I could write a love letter to a town that I knew inside out, upside down. I could write a dozen eccentric characters who were laugh out loud funny, but not to laugh at, but to laugh at the circumstances that they bring to the table. So those kinds of experiences that you have in your back pocket when you go to write a story and you want to paint your story over the top of, this gives you that confidence of writing when you are choosing to do something significant, but you want it to feel as if the author knows what they're talking about. In this one, Steal It All, well, there's London, there is the Lakes District, there are places where if I have been there, I can write with confidence. And so I have been, so I do write with confidence. So it's not always about you have to write what you know. There are some people who write a novel about sexual deprivation, all inside their head, and then that it's not necessarily that they know everything, but that their brain can manufacture those elements that they fret about and worry about and dwell on. And so for what I write, I want to speak knowledgeably in the creation of setting and character realization within that setting. So that's how I go about it.
A lot of what you've spoken to, I think, really are what I consider hallmarks of the suspense genre as a whole. A lot of that authenticity comes from a deep awareness of the place, right? Thinking of Raymond Chandler's Los Angeles, thinking of Dennis Lehane's Boston, thinking of, just all these great contemporary writers in, the suspense.
Harper's Boston.
Right. And it's just because of the lived experience. It becomes part of your artistic vernacular. And so yes. I like how you sort of have your endeavor where Donovan is sort of this rugged, globe-trotting character, and you get to place your significant travel experiences within your career and since, your government career. And sort of put that to the test and augment that knowledge, which might in itself be exciting. Folks, we haven't the time in this particular conversation, but if you just check up on any of Chuck's travel writing and endeavors. It's just he puts himself out there in the globe for this stuff. And so again, right, then you kind of have the pseudonym, right? The cozies where you can sort of speak more directly to kind of the local oriented place, two separate enterprises, essentially to two different narrative purposes through
Yep.
these longer form engagements with these characters.
Yes.
So
I
again,
have to add one tiny little thing.
please.
In all of my books,
Yeah.
one of the elements that enriches every one of my plots is pieces of information from the many books I read that are nonfiction. So
Awesome.
I'm not so focused that I can't understand how glorious other genres are.
Well, if we may then, would you like to speak to how widely and or voraciously you read? Again, do you find yourself sort of staying within your genre, or I think you just kind of alluded to kind of going hither, yon?
Yeah.
You're a very intellectually curious guy. I mean, your kids have benefited from that. I've benefited from that over the years of knowing you. So, I mean, why don't you just tell us a bit about how your sort of wider, way of bringing stuff in vis-a-vis what you read and encounter through other, I guess, media formats. How does that play out with you, sir?
Well, I make it a point to read a book of nonfiction every second book that I read, and but on the fiction side, I will absolutely gravitate toward mysteries. I love mysteries, but on the but there are other books out there that are wonderful, and I'm in a book club that takes me outside of my comfort zone on the reading front, and is good for me. An example of a book that I read that was transformative for me was Bill Bryson had written a book called A Brief History of Nearly Everything. And, it's that kind of a book where the chapters are short, but packed with brilliance. And I mean knowledge, factual, scientific brilliance. And so if you want to consolidate the Big Bang theory down to a page and a half and walk away saying, I think I know what it is, that this is the book. There's an anecdote toward the end where a reporter went to Albert Einstein's house and said, I got a tour. And at the end he said, so where's the notebook? And Albert Einstein said, well, what notebook would that be? And he said, the big ideas notebook. Where is it? Can I see it? And he said, oh, I don't get enough big ideas that I need a notebook to hold them. And I just thought, it's how do you take universal brilliance and boil it down to the prosaic? It's just a wonderful, wonderful illustration. And it was in that book. That book, when I walked away from that book, I said to myself, I think you're a little bit smarter. So how's that for a book review?
Well, that is a very solid recommendation. And I think, again, there's a lot, I think, to what you said in terms of kind of laying a subconscious kind of framework. All these inputs, all these sort of narratives, all these kind of nuggets of information or turns of phrase, or just how the universe works in a page and a half, just kind of gets tucked away. Stephen King, to turn back to the master novelist from one very close to our neck of the woods, as far as it goes.
Absolutely.
And he referred in his to the boys downstairs in terms of the subconscious sort of endeavor, within the writing. It's just you throw them down, some good stuff, and then you kind of come back to the writing, and there it is, right? They kind of brought something that they've kind of ruminated on, and it's kind of there for you.
Yeah, the best short story I ever wrote was very Stephen King-ish. It was creepy and would leave you bothered after having read it. It was lovely, and there's nothing gory about it. It's just it all happened in here. It was good. I'm really proud of that.
There's no escaping though from what's in there. And so again, to speak to your experience with that narrative, we're talking larger paths through the tradition. including going back to Edgar Allan Poe, going back to the Romantic writers even before that. Again, we can certainly go into our literary antecedents and interests well beyond the scope of what we even necessarily have time here for. We are trying to keep this relatively punchy. We are trying to keep it relatively tight. I guess I would sort of want to say at this point, Chuck, as somebody who has sort of moved through a life of creativity, and nobody's saying you're even close to done yet. I'm not getting that at all. But where you now have a significant number of novels, behind you, where you have two young men who are now out, still kind of around. You're around Fredericton, keeping it real, with families, with things going on in their lives. Both of them very creative. You have grandkids at this point who are deeply into the creative aspects of life.
That's true.
Again, so it's just how would you say at this point in your life now, kind of looking back on it with these things behind you, how do you see that sort of setting you up for what's ahead? You're kind of at your patriarch phase. You're still nowhere close to done. You still got a lot of years left in front of you, productive years.
Yeah.
How does what you've accomplished up until now position you for what you want to achieve going forward?
Well, it's funny, if you take the farmer analogy. When a farmer is starting out in a garden, they may well use a scattershot approach to spreading the seeds. They just fling them like this, and they hope that some of them bear fruit. And then later on, that same farmer might say, well, that was wonderful, and it get me what I needed at the time, but now I want corn. I really feel that corn and green beans is where my life is going to be. And so you start to plant your rows deliberately, and you ensure that the garden has the right nutrition for corn and for beans, and you don't worry about whether it's good for rutabagas. So too with my career, I'm at the stage now where I have tried writing science fiction, World War One, psychological trauma, and that's fine. All I want to do now is write a good mystery, and I want to write my mysteries better and better. And not that I have a chip on my shoulder, but I will never win literary awards. I will, like Charles Dickens says, I will make sales, and hope that is good enough for me. And it will be, because what a writer wants is a reader. And so I'm good with that. I'm cool with that. And so when you ask about my trajectory has become focused and narrowed to the point where I'm doing exactly what I love. So I am halfway through another cozy mystery. Awesome. And in October, I'm going on a cruise around the Mediterranean, and I'm sure Donovan, my thief for hire, will come with me, and he'll bring me back a story. So that's how I want to live my life. In the meantime, I have a granddaughter who last year won a province-wide poetry competition, and I got to go to Moncton and watch her read it to a room full of adults. And what gave me great pleasure was I helped her apply. You see, so there are rewards to being a grandparent, as well as to being an author.
Well, that is absolutely fantastic, Chuck. And as much as I wish I think the audience probably would get some enjoyment, I think, out of hearing us, certainly you, speak even further and in greater definition and detail to some aspects of your life and your career and your whole, endeavor generally. I will put a pin on it for now, because I have basically, achieved what we had through the scripted questions. I definitely want to just point out that Chuck all of his work that's in print can be found. Your personal website is still active. Are there any details or awarenesses that people watching this should check out in terms of contacting or engaging with you further?
Well, all of my books are available electronically and in paperback by, and I almost dare not to say it, but I will say it, Amazon. And and in New Brunswick, of course, they can be found in the library system. Actually, go to your own library system. Order my books for your library. That's a great way to get them into Alberta. And but I also, all of the bookstores in New Brunswick all know me well as well, and they're very kind to me. But that's how you get to know me a little better, I guess.
Awesome. Well, again, we will have some pretty comprehensive notes that go along with the video and the audio recording. It is Sunday afternoon, just past 2 p.m. here in my part of Canada, and so we will be putting this out through a very agile and nimble independent media enterprise later on this very day. Because we have the ability to. So we will end the recording for now. We'll end the conversation for now. Certainly, we're not finished whatsoever speaking and engaging with Chuck because, quite frankly, we're hoping he's going to be back at some point sooner than later. And yeah, that'd be great. So again, thanks a lot for being here, sir. Thanks to anybody checking this out for any reason whatsoever. Appreciate you very much, and take care. Bye-bye for now.
Okay. Bye-bye.